So welcome once again sa ating 6th of the 7th series of webinar with UPOU. So I'm here to introduce to you our resource speaker. So our resource speaker is an associate professor of the Faculty of Management and Development Studies of the UP University, Open University. She is the current director of the UPOU Office of Public Affairs. She has obtained her Bachelor of Science in Development Communication from the University of the Philippines, Los Baños. She also earned her Master of Management, major in Development Management, and Doctor of Philosophy, major in Development Communications from the same university. Over the last 2 decades, he has authored a number of international and national scientific publications, presented in various international and local conferences, and served as resource speaker in various trainings, seminars, and fora in various areas such as open and distance e-learning, environmental advocacy, development communication, and educational technology, and other related fields. Help me welcome Dr. Joane V. Ma'am.
Okay, thank you very much, Rod. I hope everyone can hear me. So I just want to greet everyone a good morning. And today we'll be talking about, or we will be discussing about learner support, and probably in the other webinars which I have attended, which is not sponsored by DICT, you have probably not encountered a topic which is solely for learner support. But at UPOU, we believe that learner support is a very component in on remote teaching and learning. Okay, so let me just share with you my screen. Okay. So I hope everyone can see the screen from your end. Okay. So again, thank you for inviting me, and I'll be talking about learner and teacher support in remote instruction. So as we discuss learner support, we will also be discussing about how we can also support the teacher as they provide support services to their students, to your students. Okay. So in your probably in your previous webinars, I wasn't able to attend the first few parts, but I'm assuming some of my colleagues have discussed the various components of a distance learning or remote teaching system. So there are basically 4 subsystems or 4 components. So the first one is course design and development. So this is when you design and develop our instructional materials or modules. And then teaching and learning, this is the time where you will now deliver your courses. So you will probably use a learning management system or other platforms to deliver your courses. And of course, organization and management talks about how you will manage your remote teaching and learning in terms of technology, structure, policies, processes, and system. And for this morning, I will be talking about a very important but often neglected topic in a remote teaching and learning environment. And this is student support. Okay. So let me just check if there's an urgent chat. I hope everything is okay from your view and I'm clear. I will just ask our MC that if I'm encountering some difficulties in terms of my audio, please call my attention because I'm not able to often see the chat box. Okay. Thank
Sure,
you.
ma'am.
So I'm sure, yes, thank you, Mom Angel. So as teachers, Many of you probably have been focusing on designing and developing your course materials as well as preparing for the actual course delivery. And of course, all of you are very looking at the learning resources, preparing for the designing the learning activities for the courses that you will be offering or for the subjects that you will be offering. But it is important that we also take a look at learner support because learner support will make or break the learning process of your students. However, based from my interactions with administrators and teachers from the previous webinars where I have been invited, many of their questions just revolve around course development, course delivery, administration, technical requirements, and not much attention is given to learner support. This is understandable since many of you, many of the teachers and administrators are actually coming from residential universities or residential schools, which are campus-based. And when we talk of campus-based, most or all of the services are available to the students anytime. So for example, a student would need books, then they would go to the library to ask for books. If they need to use the computer, they would go to the computer room to use the computer. If they would need counseling, then they would go to the counselor to ask for some personal advice. However, now that you are transitioning to a remote type of learning environment, it is important to understand that there will be now a different demands from the school since all of these services will not be available at the beck and call of the students because they will not be able to go physically to these offices to avail of these services. So as teachers, it is important that you understand the unique demands of this mode of learning as well as the unique needs of your learners. So it is important that you acknowledge that as you transition to a remote teaching and learning, the demands of your students will actually change as well as the expectations of the teachers will actually change. So that's a very important context that you have to acknowledge. Now, in a remote learning environment, there is what we call the transactional distance. You probably have heard about this in the previous talks during the first few webinars of my colleagues. And when we talk of transactional distance, this is not just the physical separation between the learner and the teacher, but it also refers to the psychological distance. And this distance, both the physical separation and the psychological distance, sometimes creates a sense of isolation due to the lack of interaction. So imagine your students, learners, especially the young ones, we are social beings. We would like to interact often with our classmates, with our teachers, with our friends. And suddenly, they're in an environment wherein they have no one to interact to physically, but they can just interact with someone online. But you cannot always do this all the time because it would, of course, depend on the availability of your friends, of your classmates. So that will be the transition that your learners will be going through. And based on literature, this sense of isolation is actually linked with attrition, instructional ineffectiveness, failing academic achievement, and negative attitudes, and overall dissatisfaction with the learning experience. Now, online and remote learners can easily feel isolated if they do not feel connected to both the school, so this is the greater context, and the local or the local context, which is the program and on the course level, social context. So if students will not have that connection with the school as well as with the teacher and their fellow learners, then they would have that feeling of isolation. And this feeling of isolation can actually negatively affect retention, and your students may drop out of your subject or course because they do not feel that they are a part of a community, and they may not be motivated to continue their studies. Now, closely associated with retention is student satisfaction. Uh, their satisfaction with the courses which are offered online or remotely. Now, as teachers, as you are preparing for your, as you are designing and developing your courses, you have to remember, and this is a very important point, you really have to take note of this, that if courses are not properly designed, students may experience frustration with the courses which are offered remotely because they do not possess the skills needed to be successful. In fact, students' feelings of isolation can be compounded if they are ill-equipped to deal with the demands of studying remotely. We have to remember that our students, your students, are used to conventional mode of learning, meaning they see each other every day, they go to a school, they see their teacher, they're able to avail of all the services in their schools. So therefore, your students may not actually possess the self-directed skill set which are actually essential for a remote teaching and learning environment. So what are these skill sets? These are self-discipline, the ability to work alone, time management, learning independently, and the ability to develop a plan for completing their own work. So it is important that you understand what learner support is, what are the different kinds of learner support, its importance, and include this as you plan for your course offering or your subject for the coming school year. Okay, now let's go to the basics and let us try to define what learner support is. So according to TAPE, learner support is a range of services both for individuals and students in groups which complement the course materials or learning resources that are uniform for all learners and which are often perceived as a major offering of institutions using open and distance learning. It is also the interactive processes that are intended to support and facilitate the learning process of the students. Another definition is that learner support are all those elements capable of responding to a known learner or group of learners before, during, and after the learning process. So take note that when we talk of learner support, this is not just about supporting them while they are your students, but it is actually supporting them before, during, and after the learning process. Now, let me point out that in these definitions, supporting the learning process and the learners are highlighted. And remember that in learner support, it is not about us, the teacher or the school, but it is about the learners. Let us always remember that when we talk of learner support or student support, we're talking about the needs of the students or the learners. And no matter how grand our plan or design for learner support is in our school or institution, what matters most at the end of the day is that we provide and cater our services to what the students need in terms of learning and coping with remote teaching and learning. So we have to shift how we view learner support from our view as teachers and shift it to their view as students and address the questions what are their actual needs and how can we support their learning. Okay. Now, it is worth noting that the term learner support is becoming more commonly used in the literature because it implies a more active and proactive role in the learning process than the word student. So if you will review the literature, you would see that there are some literature which are now using learner support instead of student support. And according to some scholars, the term learner is generic and can be applied to a wide variety of contexts within which learning takes place. So it can actually be used for both public and private schools, for basic education, for higher education, um, even for corporate and public employee training settings. And in a remote teaching, a more learner-centric model is favored over a teacher-centric one. And the roles and activities of teachers and learners have evolved, which affect the nature of learner support that should be provided by your school and you as a teacher. Now, an example of this, the decision of a learner to drop out from a course is now understood to be dependent upon a wide range of variables that have much to do with forms of learner support. Okay, now let us proceed to the functions of learner support. Now that we have established the importance of learner support, we have defined learner support and what are the commonalities in those definitions. And we have also established that there is a unique demand for students who will be studying remotely, and thus there is a crucial role that learner support will be playing. Let us now try to see what are the functions of learner support. So according to Tate, there are three functions of learner support. And so this is the cognitive function, the affective function, and the systemic function. Now let us try to look at each function individually. When we talk of cognitive function, this is about supporting and developing learning through the mediation of the standard and uniform elements of course materials and learning resources for individual students. So among the support services included here are tutoring, facilitation of learning, academic interaction between the teacher and the learners, assessment of learning, prepackaged course materials that underwent careful instructional design. Okay, so that's the cognitive function of learner support. And then we also have affective function. So when we talk of affective, we are talking of providing an environment that supports students, creates commitment, and enhances self-esteem. So we can include here materials or resources which support the development of study skills, program planning, and even career development. We can also include here guidance and counseling services, as well as services for students with special needs. For example, those differently abled persons, those who are experiencing geographical remoteness, and probably for us, persons who are incarcerated. And then the third function is systemic. Systemic is concerned with establishing administrative processes and information management systems which are effective, transparent, and overall student-friendly. So this includes all processes relating to registration, record keeping, information management, and all other processes or administrative processes that are supports learning of the students. Okay, so those are the three functions of learner support. Now, learner support is provided on three levels. So there are levels of learner support. This is very important because when doing learner or providing learner support, we are not just talking about teachers who are supporting their students. We are actually talking about here on three levels. So there should be a school or a university or an institutional level support. There should be a program level support, and there should be a course level or on a subject level support. Now, let us try to look at all these support levels of learner support individually. Okay, so take note, there are three levels of learner support on institutional or school level, the program level, or the course level. And the third one is the course level. Okay, so let us try to look at the types of institutional learner support. So this would actually depend on various literature. Some would categorize this just a few supports. But for our context in this talk, I have categorized the types of institutional learner support into 11 types of institutional learner support. And these are information support, learner intake support, administrative support, technological support, study skills assistance, counseling, library support, support to students with disabilities, student rights and gender considerations, learner satisfaction monitoring and environmental scanning, and the last one is examination and test services. So you would notice that there are many types of institutional or school level learner support. Now these are actually not new, but as I mentioned during the earlier part of my talk, these support services are actually part of offices which students go to when they are in a campus. Now that they are studying remotely and they will not be able to visit a specific office on campus, you have to find ways as a school on how to integrate all these kinds of institutional level learner support and provide this to your students on a timely basis. Because, for example, they would need an information support, and then it would take a very long time for you to provide that information, and then probably the student would not be motivated to study anymore. That's why it's important that you provide an integrative type of support, which is done on a timely and adequate manner. Okay. Now let us take a look at each type of information of each institutional learner support. Okay, the first one is information support. Now, please take note that institutional or school level learner support starts even before the learners are considered officially enrolled. So even if they are just browsing, they're just thinking of enrolling to your school, you are actually bound to provide a service to your clientele already. So when they start browsing your website and inquire about the university or school, this is the start of your institutional learner support, even if they are not yet your official students. Which is why information support must ensure the accuracy, completeness, and availability of information, which can actually be a contributing factor to the success of a remote learner. So in information support, it is important that you have a complete, updated, and accurate website. So for the small schools, you have to probably talk with your school principals or owners of your school that there should be a basic website because everything now is offered remotely. So where will the students get their information? Of course, they will get their information on a website, on a school website that is updated, that is accurate, and is always complete. Now, on the university website, all this information should be there. Information about admission, program information, contact information, and a good practice is to put an FAQ page because there are a lot of concerns and questions. So it would be best to do a frequently asked question page, and students and parents would be able to refer to that page if ever they have questions that are more or less similar. And of course, now that we are in a pandemic, in a global health public crisis, and we also have to provide information on scholarship, financial assistance, and financial aid. So just to highlight, a school or a university website must be complete, must be accurate, and all the available information must be there. And then aside from the website, because we are now in social and digital era, it is also important that you have a social media page. We know that most of our students, if not all, and of course the parents of our students, they have social media accounts. And it would be helpful if you have a social media page and you invite all of them to like your page and ask them to regularly monitor the announcements, the postings in the social media, so that you'll be able to provide your students updates on what will be happening for the next school year. And then another useful practice would be an automated response, because you will not always be available to answer the queries of your students and the parents as well 24/7, which is why you should set up a chat bot. And for universities and schools which have funds, you can subscribe or purchase a ticketing system so that when students have questions or they would send an email, there will be a ticketing system that would acknowledge that their inquiries or their questions have been received. And of course, a help desk would also be a good practice. Okay. Now, let me just highlight that the key here is to ensure that the information are, again, they are complete, they're accurate, and they are updated so that when they search your website and social media page, they would get all the information that they would need. Therefore, they will not be asking questions anymore, and they would be able to proceed with the learning process. You should always remember now that your learners will be studying remotely. They will now be dependent on the information you provide them, since they can no longer physically search for those information the way they have been used to when all of the learning happens in a campus. Okay. Now let's go to the next institutional support, which is learner intake support. Part of learner intake support is, of course, admissions. So for your newly admitted students, you need to provide support to them. Unlike in residential setting where students come to your office, now that everything is done remotely, you need to come to your students, especially the new ones, and make sure that they know what they are supposed to do step by step. This includes detailed information on how they can enroll or register and how they will pay their fees. There must be a complete and clear information about registration process, the schedule, and as well as the policies and processes. And information on financial aid, scholarship, and financial assistance must also be there, as I have highlighted in the previous kind of institutional support. Okay. Now, an important component of learner intake support is learner readiness. Learner readiness for online and remote learning. One important issue that should be addressed here is the readiness to undertake an independent mode of learning. Remember, in a remote teaching and learning, you are not always there, and you are not always present anymore. Therefore, you must ensure or encourage your student to be more independent, and they should be able to build self-confidence to learn independently, or especially now that they are remote learners. Now, learner readiness for online and remote learning is very important. This prepares the potential learners to be ready for the complex environment of online or remote learning. Now, if done right, this type of support will actually increase the success rate and decrease the attrition rate and the feeling of isolation, as well as the dissatisfaction of your students. Now, the key task under the learner intake support includes setting goals so that students can visualize how they can achieve their individual goals and help them achieve their objectives, as well as assessing their readiness for learning. Okay. Now, so just to share, at UPOU, we have what we call the distance education readiness. So before they are admitted to the university, they have to pass distance education readiness, um, so that they would have an idea what are the expectations from them as distance education learner. So in your case, you can probably design programs that will ensure that your students are now ready to study remotely. Okay. Now, another important component of learner intake support is the student orientation, which actually could include parent orientation. So you should not just orient your students, but you should also include the parents as well. This is especially true for basic education and including the college level students. Maybe this would not for the graduate level, parents did not be present anymore for the orientation. So just like when you have a just like in a campus base, when there's a start of the when it's start of the classes, then you have to plan and conduct a student orientation. So now that you are doing it remotely, then you can plan and conduct a virtual orientation for students, for the new and old ones, because the old ones, this will actually be their first time to undergo a remote type of teaching and learning. So it would be best to include them in the student orientation. Um, so aside from the, probably you would design a synchronous type of orientation, just like this one, a Zoom type of orientation, and you probably stream it via Facebook and via YouTube. But don't forget that you should also record the orientation so that those students who are able to attend the synchronous orientation, they would be able to watch it later. And then aside from the virtual or the recorded orientation, you should also prepare a printed one so that you can send this to students who do not have access to the internet. So you can probably prepare a program orientation or a up to the course level orientation. You can probably design it in such a way that it would be reader friendly, and students would be motivated to read the orientation materials instead of just pure text. At UPOU, what we do with our orientation is that we do first plenary type of orientation, wherein there's a general orientation about the university, what are the programs that we offer, how do we teach via online, what are the skills needed if you are studying online, what are the expectations from the students as well as from the teachers. Then after the general orientation, there would be a breakout session, and this would be based on the program or the course that they are taking. So they would those who are taking a particular program, they would be in one session. Another course would be in another session. So you can probably do this also even for basic education. You can probably group them according to their grade level. If you want to group them, probably the grade 5 to 6 or grade 4 to 6, or grade preschoolers, grade 1 to 3, and then for the high school, probably first year to fourth year, and then the senior high school. And then for the college, probably all the freshmen, sophomore, third year, and fourth year. So it would depend on your context. Okay. Now let us look at the administrative support part. So administrative support includes record keeping, information management, semestral registration, dropping, LOA graduation. Now, this is actually a very simple support if it's on campus. But now that you are doing it remotely, you have to design this service so that students would have access to their records, students would have access to their registration materials, students would have access to their grades, even if they are not visiting the campus. They can probably have a student database wherein students would be able to access all the records that would support them in their learning process. Okay, so this is part of administrative support. And then closely related to the administrative support is the technological support. You have to ensure that students are supported when it comes to their student database. So for example, who will be sending their login data to access their student information in their student database? How will they be able to access their grades, etc. And but one important component, of course, in technological support is the support given to the learning management system. So your school should be using a learning management system. So a learning management system could be Moodle-based. It could be Google Classroom. It could be an Edmodo or Blackboard, Canvas, what else? And other platforms that are available. And your school has decided to use that particular learning management system. But your school must also provide technological support, especially if students are having problems in terms of their login credential, in terms of some troubleshooting, in terms of technical problems. So technological support must be provided to them. And of course, it is important that there should be security of student data. There should be cybersecurity. Technological support also includes data analytics, software apps, programs, hardware and tools, as well as the troubleshooting of all types of technological problems, and including maintenance. Okay. Now, another very important component of institutional support is the study skill assistance. Study skill assistance is knowing how the students categorize themselves and knowing their daily life demands. So learners would have different specific study skills. For example, elementary students would have different study skills, high schoolers, college students, grad students would have different specific skills. So you have to adapt the study skill assistance to the context of your learners. Most of the reasons why students drop out boils down to problems relating to time management and study schedules. So this is part of the study skill assistance that you will providing. You should provide them with materials that will assist them on how to manage their schedule, for example. This is especially true for the high schoolers and college students. We know that students are very fond of playing games. So they should know how to manage their time. They should balance their time between playing games and study time. And this is part of the skill set that should be provided to them. Now, especially now that students will be staying at home and they will be in front of their computers most of the time. So we really do not know if the students are just playing games, surfing the net, or are they really studying. So you must provide various forms of study skill assistance that will help them in their time management as well as balance their educational pursuit with other life demands. We should also provide study skill assistance, but by teaching our students how to find reliable sources, making critical analysis of information from online resources, improving reading comprehension, annotating online resources, writing papers, and clarification of rules for citation and avoiding plagiarism. We should also be providing study skill assistance on cyberbullying, digital security, and protecting data privacy. At UPOU, when we started out in 1995, we developed handbooks which we give to our students so that they would have study skills. So we develop handbooks on getting organized as a distance learning, how to read comprehensively, how to study how to study as a distance learners, etc. So we provided all those information through a handbook to our students during the time. But now that we are online, it's actually easier because there are a lot of resources which you can provide to your students so that they would develop this type of study skill, which is actually very important in a remote teaching and learning environment. Okay. So important here is that they should develop confidence in themselves as students and find ways to manage the stress of learning, especially mental stress brought about by the pandemic. Okay. Another important learner institutional support is counseling. So now that you will be providing online counseling, your counselors also need to retool and upgrade themselves on how to provide online counseling. So how do you really provide online counseling when you lack all the social cues which are present during face-to-face counseling? So online counselor can develop online resources that help students identify and address barriers to reaching their educational goals, interact with learners when intervention is necessary, and as well as to work with the other staff to ensure the processes and procedures enhance learning. You can also have a referral here. If your school is quite small and you don't have a registered or a licensed counselor, then you can assign staff to talk to your students, what are their problems and concerns. And if they really need professional counseling, then you should have a referral system, which wherein you will refer them to professional counselors. Okay? And then we have the library support. The major challenge in giving library support to remote or online learner is, of course, access. Distance learners will not be able to access the physical books anymore, which your library offers. And therefore, your school must explore various kinds of subscription to online databases in order for your remote learners to have access to these kinds of materials. Now, if your school is quite small and you don't have budget for subscription, then you can make use of open educational resources. In your previous talk, you can review the video of the previous talk. Open educational resources are resources that are publicly available and they are free to use. And there are usually OER repositories which you can access so that you'll be able to make use of these learning resources. Okay. A well-designed library support should be readily accessible from the institution web pages. So there should be a link there that will go to the library support. And then part of library support is that you provide a tutorial for new learners on how to use or how to access the various support services offered by your library. And it is also important that the resources or the materials which are offered by your library must be integrated already with the online courses, and you should provide tools to assist with online searches. So a recommended library support is one where it is readily accessible and that there are available tutorials and resources so that students would be able to easily access these library support and resources. And if you have a very small library, then what you can do is you link learners with other libraries. So you write, for example, the principal or the librarian can write a letter, official letter to universities and schools and ask support for them so that you can link your learners with their library support. Okay. Now, it is also important that we also provide support to differently abled persons. So it should be part of our advocacy within our school that there should be inclusion. Therefore, you should provide alternative formats for learning materials. So it should be in various kinds of formats. So for example, if we have a video, what about students who are blind? How can they watch video? So you can probably make this available in other formats, for example, in video and printed mode, so that a printed mode can be read to them instead of watching the video. And then for universities with budget, you can explore assistive technologies to assist your students with disabilities. And of course, again, you can have a referral system for specific needs so that you can refer them to schools catering to these special needs. And then, of course, there's students' rights and gender consideration. Student support should be gender responsive, uphold student rights, follow the student code conduct, acknowledge ownership of knowledge, intellectual property, honesty, and integrity. So you should make your students aware of their rights, as well as if they have gender-related concerns, you should be able to address their concerns. So if they have concerns, how will they access this kind of support to them? And then one important part of student right is the right to interact with their peers. So you should provide an avenue for peer support. So you can call it, for example, study buddy support. A study buddy will keep your students motivated. They will have someone to remind them of important upcoming events. They have someone to test their knowledge and ability with, and they can actually develop networks outside the classroom through a peer-to-peer support or a peer or a study buddy support. Okay. Now, learner satisfaction monitoring is also important. Now, there are the data analytics which you can actually access in your learning management system in order for you to monitor student performance as well as student participation. So, for example, if you are using Moodle, I'm familiar with Moodle because that's what we are using. There are analytics there which show you students who participated, the number of students who participated, students who were able to download a particular learning resource, students who were able to do a learning activity. And there's even a data analytics there which show you that students are at risk, meaning they have not done anything at all in the learning management system. So it's important that you maximize the affordances of those data analytics. And then, of course, you should also do survey on student satisfaction. How are they faring in terms of studying remotely? How are their modules? How's the learning management system? What are their concerns, problems that they encounter? So you should regularly monitor them so that you'll be able to improve on those services for the next semester or even during the semester. Okay. And of course, one important institutional learner support is an examination and test services support. Remember, students will not be able to physically sit down to take an exam. So this should be planned on an institutional or school level. How will you arrange examination of students and how will you conduct invigilation? So this is part of institutional learner support. Okay, so those are the 11 institutional learner support. Now let us go to program support. In program advising, students need to be walked through the programs or course planning, program requirements, as well as transferability of courses in case of shifting of career before the end of the program. So this can be covered by the program chair, the department chair, or the academic advisor. So you should have an updated program handbook. You should provide program or course planning. You should provide program requirements, and you should provide immediate support related to the program. And it is also a good practice to have an FAQ, frequently asked questions for academic advising, so that students would not be asking you questions, but they can actually independently work on their own using those FAQs and using the program handbook that you have provided them. Okay, so this is the second level of support. So we have the institutional and now we have the program level support. Okay, now let's go to the course level support. So the institutional level support is where your school must be involved with. On the program level support, these are probably the college dean, the department chair, the program chair. So this is on the program level support. Now on the course level support, this is now your role as a teacher to provide support services to your students in order to aid them in their learning process. Now, it is important to note that learner support is related to all aspects, especially in course design and delivery. Based on research, a good design can reduce substantially the demand for learner support by ensuring clarity and in appropriate activities. So part of course level support is that you as a teacher must apply the design principles in the development of course materials so that you would reduce the demand for learner support. So what are these design principles? You design for learners, you design for learning outcome, you design for learning resources, and you design for interaction. Because if you design for learning interaction, meaning you design learning activities that will allow for collaborative activities and that promote active learning, then you are actually enhancing learner support because students are able to interact with one another, meaning they're actually providing peer-to-peer support with each other. With that kind of a strategy, you are actually reducing the demand for learner support. Okay. Now, it is important to provide scaffolding as part of learner support on a course level because it helps students when they struggle with new concepts or ideas. It helps students to gain deep understanding of a topic or subject, and it helps students to evaluate a range of different ideas or practices, as well as help students to understand the limits of their knowledge and challenge students to go beyond their current level of thinking or practice to acquire deeper understanding or a higher level of competency. Okay. Now, let us go to the nitty-gritty of what are expected of you as a teacher when you are providing learner support. As a teacher in an online or a remote teaching and learning environment, you actually have 4 kinds of role. So unlike in a campus-based or in a classroom setting, the teacher is the sage on the stage. So when you say this, that's actually the rule, and your students will follow. But now that you are in remote teaching and learning environment, it's an entirely different learning environment. And as a teacher, you have these four kinds of role so that you will be able to support your students considering the complex uh, learning environment that they are in now and considering the unique demands of remote teaching and learning. Okay, so you have four roles. There's the pedagogical role, wherein the teacher creates discussion that focus energy on critical concepts, principles, and skills, as well as provide feedback. There's the social role, which fosters a friendly social environment to promote learning and sharing. And there's the managerial role, which clarify discussion, objectives, timeliness, and procedural rules, as well as technical role, because you should make your students comfortable with the learning management system as well as the tools and software that you will be using for your course. Okay, so there are actually four stages of facilitation. So this is important because if you are aware of these stages of online facilitation or teaching, then you'll be able to provide appropriate learner support. So the four stages of facilitation in an online or remote teaching and learning environment, first is before the course begins. Second, during the first week. Third, throughout the course. And fourth, during the final week. So let's take a look at each of these stages. Okay. So before the course begins, you have a managerial role to play. So what do? So you send information, you send informational message, including how to log in, what materials are needed, and how to get these materials, and who to contact for technical assistance. You have to make the course available at least 1 week prior for student previewing. When I say make course available, you have to click in the learning management system that you're using. You have to click in show because it's actually hidden from your student. So it's your role now as a teacher to show the course now so that it will be available to the student. This is important because this is actually one of the problems that we encounter when we had new teachers who are teaching first time in an online environment. So we had received messages from students asking how come their specific course is not yet available, even if the semester has already started. And then when we investigated on it, we found out that the teacher was not able to click on the show, so the course remained hidden. Even if the course was already complete, it was hidden from the student. So it's part of your managerial role to ensure that you will be able to click on show on the button show so that students will be able to see and have access to the course site. And then you should update the course guide and study guide with your name on it, your contact information, the preferred communication method, expected response times to messages and assignments, and other policies specific to your specific course. Now, this is very important that you put in the preferred mode of communication, because as a new teacher in an online or remote environment, you will be overwhelmed if you do not put it, if you do not articulately put it in your course guide, because students will be sending you messages through your email, through your cell phone, through your messenger, and they will be asking you all sorts of questions. So this is part of your course policy. How will you communicate to them, and what are the expected response times so that students would be guided accordingly? And then you should provide a method for students to use online tools before required assignments to reduce anxiety and resolve technical issues before tasks are due. correct spelling or grammatical errors throughout the course content, update, etc. And part of your pedagogical rule is that you ensure that the course that you will be offering underwent a thorough instructional design. And then part of your technical role is that you update hyperlinks to remove dead or broken links, because students would be sending you messages saying that I cannot access the link that you provided. So it's part of your technical role that you update the hyperlinks so that all the links are working. You should also ensure that all media are properly displayed, all videos are properly playing. Then you should test the course navigation for accessibility and corrects any accessibility problems. You update course to reflect new features of the course management software. And then on the first week, this is very critical because unlike in your face-to-face or your classroom setting, wherein you will just do a roll call and then you would know that students are absent or they're not able to come to class for a number of days now. In an online setting or remote learning setting, you have to check their course participation. And then you should contact the missing students to encourage their participation. So there's a data analytics in the learning management system that would show you if a particular student has not participated, has not logged in, has not downloaded, has not seen at all, or has not participated in a forum. And then based from that, you can contact the student and ask them if they're not able to, sorry, let me just get my. So you can contact your students and ask them how come they have not participated in the course yet. And then you can provide support information when needed. For example, how to get remote access to the library, and how to access the learning resources that are required for your courses. Okay, and then as part of your social role, it is important that you provide a personal and welcoming introduction to develop a personal presence. Now, I would like to highlight this one because probably you are thinking, oh, I will just set up a Zoom meeting with my students and I will welcome them so that they would know that it's now start of our class or our course. But you have to remember that not all students have access to a synchronous type of communication. They would not probably have access to Zoom, to Messenger, and they would just be relying to the modules that you will be sending them, which is why you should also develop a personal and welcoming introduction, which will be attached to the modules that you will be sending to your students. This is to establish your personal presence and to build rapport to your students. Remember, the feeling of isolation is one of the main causes of dropping out in a remote teaching and learning environment. And then you design a forum for students to post introduction and share experiences. And of course, you have to respond to the introduction of the student. You can ask, and for the learning management system, you can encourage students to share pictures or other representations, for example, an avatar of themselves. It's also important that you model discussion response behavior and tone. If you use a conversational tone for responses that is inviting, personal, friendly, and encouraging, then you are actually modeling to your student that they should also use this kind of tone. Now you have to balance between being too friendly and of course being quite formal, considering that it is a formal course that you are offering. And of course, you should refrain from writing informal text as if you are texting. So you should always do it in a formal way so that you are modeling that type of communication to your students. And then you should also assist students with login or access difficulties. And then now, after the first week is quite critical because that's the time wherein you have to establish your presence and you have to ensure the students are participating. After that, the next stage or phase is throughout the course. Throughout the course, you should ensure that you are following designated schedule. You should enforce guidelines for learner behavior such as netiquette. Um, Throughout the course, you should be able to spot uh, cyberbullying or disrespectful behavior from your students, and you should remind them that they should respect each other. So this should be part of your netiquette policy. So this is part of your role as a social role, that you should monitor this discussion and that students are following universal behavior policies. If bullying is rampant in campus-based setting, cyberbullying is also rampant in an online or remote teaching and learning, which is why it's part of your role and you should be able to spot if there's cyberbullying that's happening. And then when that happens, you should immediately remove that disrespectful post so that the class will not be able to see it anymore. And then you should not reprimand that particular student in the whole classroom setting, but you can call the attention of that particular student. And then what you can do is post a reminder to all the students that they should follow NICET standards and university behavior policies. You can use this as part of your announcement so that students would be reminded of how they should behave in an online environment. We should put ourselves in the shoe of our students. This is their first time to study in a remote or an online environment. And they may not be aware of the various rules or the netiquette standards that they should follow. That's why you should clearly articulate it in your course policy. Because our students are just the only experience, the only online experience that they have would probably be their experience in their Facebook or in their social media interaction. And you know how students interact in social media, kind of unruly. And sometimes they would probably bring in that kind of behavior to your class. That's why you should be able to ensure that you have a course policy that you can refer them to so that they would know how to behave properly in your class. Okay. And then as part of your pedagogical role and part of your learner support is that you also provide synthesis of discussion. You should provide feedback indicating areas in which the students have succeeded, as well as areas that require further development, and this should be done in a timely manner. Now, you should be creative because remember, not all students are doing their classes online. Some would be doing their classes in a modular type of learning. So you should think of ways how you'll be able to send your feedback to your students. So you could probably create a group chat in Messenger because Messenger usually have they can use data, or they can use the free open or free access of Facebook, and you can create a group chat there and provide feedback to your students as part of your learner support. Or you can send SMS so that you would still ensure that your students feel your presence as a teacher. Okay. Now, okay, so I think I have shared this with the ICT. If not, I will send a PDF copy and I can share this to to the viewers so that they would have an understanding of the different roles that they will be playing. So that I will not be reading all these roles or the description of the roles anymore. And then throughout the course on the technical role, you should be able to model competency when it comes to using the learning management system as well as using the tools appropriately. And then you should provide handouts in easy to use formats and provide details for downloading those particular handouts. And you should respond to completed assignments by the students, and you should also do this electronically. And of course, throughout the course, you should direct your students to links and information on technical support, especially if they are encountering some technical problems. So you should be able to refer them to the institutional level technological support. Now, another very important phase is during the final week. So as part of your managerial role, during the final week, you should provide general information about the final exam, if there's a final exam, or what final assessment will you be providing as a teacher. You should alert students on how long course material will continue to be available after the end of the class, because students would probably think that the course site will be open forever and they have not yet downloaded all the handouts or the materials that you have uploaded in the course site. So you should remind them how long will the course materials will continue to be available. And then you should inform of availability and encourages the students to complete the evaluation portion. Of course, we all know that we ask our students to evaluate us and our course. And then, of course, as part of your managerial role, you should post the final grades promptly. And part of your social role, since this is now the end of the course or the end of the semester, you have to send an email with a closing personal message to students. So if they are not, if they do not have access online, then you can send personal note through SMS, or you can send a letter, a printed letter with a personal message to the students. And you should encourage students to share their class experience and say goodbye in a closing forum. Usually in my course site, I have there what I call a copyhan forum. So it's a forum wherein I allow my students to just share anything under the sun. So anything goes. They can share their experiences as an online learner. They can share materials. They can share narratives and stories. So in the same way, you can encourage your students to share their class experience, so that this can actually be part of an evaluation on your part, so that you'll be able to improve how you design your course for the next semester, so that you'll be able to improve the learning experience of your students. And part of your pedagogical role is that you provide feedback on final project and make it available to students even after the class is over. And part of the technical role during the final week is for you as a teacher to list down all the technical aspects that work well and those that need improvement. And then after you have listed down all these things to improve on and things that work well, you can forward it to the technological support, so that they will be able to improve on their services as well. Okay, so as you can see, your role now as a teacher in a remote or online environment is quite complicated, and this is actually quite taxing. That's why you should be able to acknowledge that your role has actually changed, and that you should really prepare for it, so that you'll be able to address the learning needs of your students. Okay. Now, as an institution and on a program and on a course level support, how can we say that we are providing an effective learner support? So these are some of the characteristics of an effective learner support. First is that it should be purposeful. It should exist to support learners in their studies from first inquiry through graduation and beyond. As I mentioned, when we talk of learner support, it is not just during their learning process, but it should be prior, during, and even after. And then it should be transparent. The learner support should be transparent. It should provide clear points of contact, clear standards of service identified. It should be accessible, available on demand according to the needs of the learner, 24/7 where possible. That's why I said you can explore chatbot and ticketing systems so that 24/7 support would be possible. It should be responsive to individual needs and provide efficient turnaround. It should be interactive, encourage and facilitate interaction among and between students, faculty, student support staff, and academic content. It should be self-directed and developmental, should facilitate self-management of processes and development of skills and attitudes necessary for independence and lifelong learning. It should be integrated. It should demonstrate a high level of cross-functional collaboration that results in services being experienced as seamless by the learner. So it's important that the services that you provide should be seamless and integrative in nature. It should be open to change, meaning it should evolve continuously to accommodate new learner populations, educational developments, economic conditions, technological advances, and findings from research and evaluation. Okay, now how do you build an effective online learner support services? So with all those characteristics, how can you now build an effective learner support services? Okay, number one, of course, as I mentioned, this does not just involve the teacher. This actually involves the school or the institution or the university. So number one, of course, is that there should be commitment from the university officials to establish a system of learner support. Number two, you can create a cross-functional team. So the team should be cross-functional and should not just be coming from one office, but it should be coming from different offices to develop a strategic plan for student support services. So they can be coming from Office of Student Affairs, Office of University Registrar, the Dean's Office, the ICPDO, the program director should be involved, etc. And then number three, align the plan with institutional mission and strategic direction. And number four, clearly identify the objectives to be achieved by making the transition to online student services and how achievement of these objectives will be measured. For example, an objective can be improved satisfaction with services for all students, retention, skill development, or engagement. And number five, you should ensure that there is representation from students. So how do you do this? You ask them for their ideas about how student services can be improved and or made more accessible through innovative application of technology. And then number six, you should collect any relevant information to be considered. So you should conduct an analysis of the learner characteristics, data about impact of existing services, the needs of the students, reports from online faculty about need for referral points, research about future needs, and identify gaps in services. And then you develop the integrated and seamless process and procedures for learner support services. And then you continually monitor and evaluate your support services provided. Okay, so that ends my presentation. I hope I have shared something valuable to you as a teacher, so that you'll be able to provide an effective online learner support services to your students. With that, I thank you everyone for listening, and I welcome questions from you. Thank you.
How can teachers ensure online integrity in these trying times?
Okay, so when probably, sir, when you talk of integrity here, it's quite encompassing. So it could include integrity when you design your courses, so from learning resources that you use for the learning activities, including the protection of data as part of ensuring integrity. I think what is important here is that you really plan for it, and then you design, you include it in your design, include it in your course design, include it in your course policy, so that everything is put into record and are clearly articulated in your course policies. So for example, let me just share an example. In my course, for example, whenever I give an assignment, I ask my student to sign a particular assignment, saying that they are the ones who did that particular assignment and that they have complied to the university rules and regulations on honesty and integrity. So that is a practice that I do, so that I'll be able to ensure that the submission done by the student is actually his or her work. So what I'm saying here is that you should integrate all ways, all kinds of policies and processes within your course design and within the way you deliver your courses.
UP obviously has done a wonderful and successful job through the Open University. I would just like to know if UP or DepEd made a discussion on how our public school system can be supported as we shift to distant learning.
I think DepEd has invited a number of holders and has discussed with them different ways to conduct the remote teaching and learning. But I'm not sure how they would operationalize it, but I'm sure our university has been part of that discussion. Our chancellor has been attending some discussion with DepEd, but I'm not really sure how the Department of Education would be able to operationalize, considering that there are so many aspects that should really be included in the development as well as in the delivery of instruction.
With all the roles that a teacher should assume in remote teaching and learning, isn't it too overwhelming for first-time teachers in the remote setup? What role should we give focus first to be an effective teacher?
Yes, that is true po. It's actually overwhelming. I would like to acknowledge that it's really overwhelming, especially for first time online or remote teacher. So my advice would be is for you teachers to really focus now. Now that you are that you have not yet started your classes, that you make sure that you are designing your subjects or your courses properly, integrating all the needs of the students so that the demand for learner support would be minimized. And then when it's time for you now to do the actual facilitation during the semester, you can focus on the managerial and pedagogical role, so that you should ensure that your students are monitored in terms of their learning, especially for the elementary and the high school students, because they would need constant support, especially in terms of managing their time, because they are children, they would always be probably playing computers or doing other stuff. So the managerial role is important because it's like a classroom management type, if we would parallel it to a classroom setup. So you should be able to manage the students, and you should provide them with skill set so that they would be able to adapt to this particular learning environment. When providing skill set, it's important that you have clear guidelines for students to follow. So it's like modeling how students would go through a particular day, for example. So the setup for higher education and basic education is very important. That's why it should depend on the context. And you as teachers would know best what are their needs of the students. So I think to sum up, I should focus on the pedagogical and the managerial role. The social role actually comes in naturally. I mean, teachers are, social being and very caring to their learners. So it comes in naturally anyway.
Thank you for joining us. We are DICT MC1 World Champion at World Summit on Information Society Prizes 2020 by International Telecommunications Union. We wish you a safe and blessed week. Please stay negative. Bye po!